What's up? Alan Wilson. Here to do a video on suffering. It's been a couple days or so since I've done a legitimate video with the setup because the lesson continues and I've had to really process this one or work through it, and because I'll start from the beginning. Really, very first thing that happened is all my shiny distractions that I like to use, all my hobbies and things, sort of got taken away. So I haven't been just kind of been sitting in my own stuff, so to speak. What I used to have to set in for, 10 years or 1 to 2 years, 6 months, 2 months, a few weeks, then a couple days, and it's getting easier as I grow. But I had to sit in it for a second and really switch perspectives on what was really going on, and the duality: am I a victim, or am I what am I supposed to be doing? What am I, or what is the lesson, basically? That's what I'm getting at. Sometimes God does for us what we can't do for ourselves, and even takes away the good things in our lives so we can look up, we can look down and look and become aware of what's really going on, and get back in tune. Because the very first thing I started doing was meditation. I had to meditate because to get through the pain at first, and that worked flawlessly. I didn't have to resort to anything drastic. It was meditation and breath work that I've learned through qigong yoga practices, and going in and doing a form of meditative healing, meditative surgery, things like that, and really seeing it for what it was, becoming aware of my body, getting in tune with it, and realizing just how beautiful a process it is. Because I in those points of suffering, if that's what we want to call them, there's a perspective change. We go from or what we eventually learn to go from self-will to God's will. We're relying on ourselves, on our right arm, on all of our shiny objects that are hobbies that distract us from, the truth within, or their relationship with the God of our own understanding, and those are taken away and kind of get put right back into, or out of ourselves, into a higher, calling or purpose, nothingness, becoming no one, however whatever fancy sentence you want to put on it. But it got me thinking about suffering, and I've learned throughout my life that suffering is grace without attachment, if that makes sense. The things that we're suffering from, sometimes in our life we feel as if we're suffering. Perhaps we're a victim in our minds. If they would just do this, or whatever it may be, if they would act a certain way, if I had more money, or if they had more money, or if they wasn't starving, or if I wasn't starving, or we can think of anything to justify or to distract us from our own suffering, which keeps us from our lesson of grace and keeps us from the art of detachment from ourselves, and keeps us from raising our level of consciousness, breaking through emotional trauma, past trauma or emotions and programming that we grew up in or that we've set upon ourselves with our experiences based off of our past, generations. I could go on about this stuff. So I started thinking about the suffering and how, I've had enough practice and to realize that the very next word after suffering is usually grace for me. And because there's a perspective change. So, you start to find the beloved in the suffering because you start to rely, with practice, you start to rely on the beloved or God to see what the teaching is. Jesus manifested himself in drag, showed up in drag in a broken wrist and broken bones and a cast to teach me a lesson. That's the deal. There's a lesson in it. The guru shows up. And it's a beautiful reminder. And I found myself over the past week and a half or so, when people ask me how I'm doing or how's my arm doing, there's a part of me that says it sucks, but I find myself saying, well, it's been a beautiful process. And that's just the truth. Sometimes we can't even sit down the shiny distractions, the meditation, the busy being a yogi, busy being, someone who hand makes, crochets, hand makes art, clothing, who owns this company, who, makes videos to help people. Things like that. I was busy being, and then when we can't be busy being, and we have to slow down, then the truth starts coming out. The ego starts to break down. So I'm going to read a few things. Typically I'd write them down, but I can't write. That's my dominant hand. So just a few things just to listen to, and that I was kind of scrolling through last week about some suffering. And St. Augustine said, God had one son on earth without sin, but never one without suffering. Isaiah 53:4 said, surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering, yet we consider him punished by God, stricken by him and afflicted. So this is a lot about, the crucifixion is a lot about, it's very, very close to your Buddhist teachings, your Eastern world teachings about the body being a temporary form and the soul leaving the body. If you look at a corpse, that is what the body is without the soul. The soul is what keeps it alive and moving and attached. And this scripture is a perspective shift. Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering, yet we consider him punished by God. So a lot of us have problems with our relationship with God or with teachings because we have attachments to resentments that we don't even know. We're not teachable. We haven't worked through those parts of emotions of trauma. I hear everywhere I go, I grew up Catholic and I just can't get with it. Well, then you've taken on some of your own attachments and ideology of what, that you can't even blame other people because you're the one holding on to what they were teaching or what they thought. So therefore now it is your blockage. It's your responsibility to work through it. So the lesson in the crucifixion is that, he did bear the suffering, but it didn't matter. He manifested, a new body within 3 days and walked out. And that lesson was to show us that, we can do the same, and that the body is basically just a temporary suit that we put on, and that we can still manifest through soul and spirit. And even after, on the third day, what a lot of the Eastern world teaches is about the Atma. I'm reading in the Living Bhagavad Gita now, and they're talking about the Atma or the soul. The Bible's just been translated so many times that, and it's a different language now for us Westerners than Swami translating Sanskrit or whatever. So that's the lesson in it, though, is the Atma, like, even he manifested a new body because the suffering didn't matter. He got closer to God, to the Father, during suffering, so close that he became consciousness and manifested a new body, a new form. That he went from formless back into form, and just to show that it could be done. And then he returned to Atma, or the soul, who lives in the hearts of all, basically. So that's sort of that teaching, and there's a couple other ones that I want to read. Suffering is part of the human condition, and it comes to us all. The key is how we react to it, either turning away from God in anger and bitterness, or growing closer to Him in trust and confidence. That was Billy Graham. And then J.K. Rowling said, "To hurt is as human as to breathe." So, one last one. Matthew 5. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. And that's the deal, is what we're trying to work through attachments at all times. That that's really what suffering is detaching from attachments. Oh, I'm in pain. Oh, I'm hurt. In switching perspective on it versus seeing it as being a victim or punishment. So the perspective shift on going from suffering to grace is basically like getting rid of the attachment or the identification with it. One of the very first things I found myself saying after this happened, because I couldn't button my pants, I can't write, I can't pull my hair back, I can't do a lot of things. And the very first thing I thought of was, it's times like these that we learn to love again. And as much of a loving person as I truly am, that I come from the heart, that I reach out to people and that I try to help people, be of service, be the same person consistently all the time, never like a bunch of acting or reacting to different scenarios. As much as I hold space for peace, I still I don't want to say lack love. I still had lessons to learn in unconditional love. And it was kind of immediately mirroring, because as much as I am an independent person and that I can take care of myself, and that I've created this life of abundance to where I can help people, be of service, help myself, and not have to work every day, that I can make videos and create, donation-based channels and things like that. Like, I've created this stuff, it's a peaceful life. I'm not striving for the best life. I'm striving for a peaceful life of abundance and love. And yet I found myself saying, It's times like these we learn to love again. And it took me about 3 or 4 days to work through that. That's why I haven't, made a video, because these are some heavy topics when you think that, you're a very lovable person and that you are a lovable person, but yet there's still more to learn. There's still space in between you and God, which is the love, which is the peace. And sometimes he dresses up in drag and looks like this to teach you that. So how can that not be a beautiful process? When you have a perspective shift from something like this and being, sort of a victim and in pain, and I love people, how are you doing? Do you need any help? Like, there's a part of all of us that wants to be wanted and needed, and wants people to care. And to be able to look past my own self-pity in those situations, or old ideas or ways of thinking, and say something like, well, it's been a beautiful process. My meditation, it's taken me to different places in my meditation, so I've grown in my meditation. I've learned to breathe even more so, practicing, the breathing that I've learned in yoga, and to get past and through the pain, and hopefully, I won't know yet, but to heal my body. The body's going to heal. I just, the idea is for it to heal properly, because I opted out of the plates and screws, so, to be continued on that. And I really won't know until the cast comes off. But, after hours and hours of meditation, I just felt like maybe it wasn't the right thing to do from my personal experience. Now we'll see what that looks like later on. But suffering turns to grace if we stop identifying with the body like Christ did, like like Lord Krishna talks about in the Bhagavad Gita. When we get rid of the attachment and think of the soul or the higher mind. Now, the Bhagavad Gita is about conversation between the seeker and the higher self. And the whole thing is a relationship on, Arjuna trying to get closer to God, to understand, working through the body and the egoic mind to reach, the relationship, a higher understanding, to get rid of identification, to detach from the egoic mind. So every time I go through trials and tribulations and suffering, I look back at it in hindsight, and it was a blessing. It's hard to see it now. That's the thing, is like, I look at these things, and it's really slowed me down in other areas of my life and work. So I'm really, I found myself the other day, like, like financially struggling. One of my main business was basically on life support from the government anyways. So there's that. And then on top of that is like, that I can't do any of my idle minds, make anything for that, because I'm down. So I'm 2 businesses down, and I can't tell you where the next dollar is going to come in from, but that's not even what's important. That I have to detach from even that idea, and know, like, as a being as a person that's self-employed, an entrepreneur, if that's what you want to call it, that the past 5 years the bills have always been paid. That's a tough position to be in sometimes. Complete faith of like, can't do anything, and you gotta know like that people are gonna show up, that people might donate, to the channel or whatever it may be. I might get a phone call to shoot some video, or I don't know. But I know that those are things that I'm probably not supposed to be thinking about at the moment, that it's time to rest and heal and meditate and practice, not only practice yoga in a studio, but practice yoga of the mind and practice yoga at home while I'm sitting on my couch while I'm trying to cook dinner with my left hand, which I'm not, I've had to learn a lot of things because I'm just not used to it. But I buttoned my pants the other day and took a shower for the first time since all of it happened. And I was just like, I felt such a sense of accomplishment. And it sounds so simple, but it was such a beautiful thing, But I don't know. If you liked the video, if you want to donate to the channel, if you want to comment, tell me, your situation, your testimonies. If you comment, people read comments, it may help. It may show courage to other people. It may help them with your story, or relate, or help them to speak up. And then we're no longer alone or separated. Then we become a unified, being with our stories, our testimonies, our experiences. We start to become one. That's what I'm really trying to say. So I love y'all, and until next time, peace.